Hi, everyone. So excited to be here, as always. Even more excited to have Dave Snell with us and Jason Girardo, and really kind of not only share what we're doing and thinking, but kind of following up from where we were together 2 weeks ago and what we were sharing and thinking. And, chat's wide open. Love to hear what your feedback or insights on the subject or a new subject that relates to it, because the more we can serve you, the more we're serving everyone. With that said, Dave, why don't you kick it off with what's been going on in your life and how are you making changes and adapting for the better?
Yeah, thanks, Don, and good to see you again, Jason, and everybody. Don pointed out when we were talking beforehand, I'm leaning more back towards my security background and my private investigator skills, and that has brought a whole set of challenges to which I've had to adapt. As we were talking, I didn't mention earlier, but normally I'm a very early to bed, early to rise, get started and going, and then okay, well, I stayed up till after midnight for a case. Well, I had to adapt my time schedule and mental state to say, okay, look, you're tired, recognize where you are. And now I caught up on some of that sleep. So I know you never really catch up on, but I rested a little extra this morning. And it's really changed I've had to adapt to look at what the business opportunities are going to be. How do I present myself as a security guy, a little bit outside of my normal cybersecurity path, and how I can help people solve their problems. And that's been a very exciting adventure the last couple of months, working with fellow private investigators, security professionals, and figuring out, okay, here's your niche, here's my niche, how can we work together, and adapting our plans. As we say in the military, no plan survives first contact. So you have to adapt as you go along, and each case is never the same. It's never straightforward the way we go through things. So it's been a fun adventure.
Well, so what are you learning through shows like this, LinkedIn, that you're applying to what you're doing on a regular basis? And what are you learning from what you're doing on a regular basis that you can transfer to what you're doing here?
Well, to answer that, very simply is on LinkedIn, I'm able to adapt to a change in my perspective of who it is I'm seeking out for networking and greater knowledge expertise. And then on the other side, we've talked a lot about newsletters in our cohort of sorts there. And it's given me the ideas of, okay, here's some experiences I've had. How do they relate to everybody's day to day and what they can do to protect themselves? Because in the end, from my perspective on a business side, I like to work more with businesses and how they can protect their critical information and what's important to them to stay market valuable. Well, now I can take some of these things I'm learning from practical experience and share them in my own newsletter, hopefully starting in April.
That's excellent, because I knew about newsletters, used them occasionally, but they were pretty deficient in their reach, in LinkedIn's ability to support and expand that audience for you. And then everything changed when LinkedIn created the opportunity to write an article. And as soon as you write that article, turns into a post where it never did before. So you could have a long form article and 10 people may see it, may read it. That's a question mark. Never happened to me. But once I figured, hey, if I'm going to do a post anyways, why not start it as a newsletter, and it converts itself. And now you got a newsletter and a post, where before you would only had a post. And then about a month ago, and that's the great thing about being in a collaboration group, is people start seeing and learning little tidbits that isn't really widespread as far as broadcast. And now LinkedIn lets you have 5 newsletters. And without getting in too deep, LinkedIn gives you one free ride that when you post your first newsletter article, it invites everybody in your connection group to join it. So I got up to like 13,000 in my first newsletter, of which 8,000 was created in 3 days. And then I said, well, I have a second newsletter to specifically relate to a show. So if it was like career transition, it'd be the career transition newsletter, and I'd use it to promote the next day show. Anyways, did that, got 6,000 almost overnight. And what you got to look at is LinkedIn and live streaming is like a rocket ship. It needs fuel. It needs promotion, to build something, leave it on the street and hope somebody figures it out and takes care of it. And that's where integrating, to your point, there has to be a process and there has to be a reason beyond what it is you just did that has a positive influence on what you really want to do. The other thing I'm learning is too many people are settling for small ideas and small people because they're getting what they can, not what they need. So if 100 people say, let's connect today, will you connect with all of them? And the question I always say, will I have a call with this person in 10 minutes? And if the answer is no, then I've already hit my ceiling and they don't even know it, which is even worse because now they may have an expectation of a relationship. So I think too many people get creative when they should get practical. Too many people get practical when they get when they should be creative. But one man is not an island. And until you put yourself together with other people who are doing exactly what you're doing, maybe for different reasons, maybe for different ways, then that's even better. Because if they're walking down the same road you are, they're seeing the same thing you are. If someone's doing this, like Carl's just an expert at newsletters. And what makes him an expert, he's done 100 days in a row.
Yeah.
Right? Anytime you can continually practice. I did 600 shows in a row, 7 days a week. And it was one show at a time, one day at a time, one speaker at a time. And it made it possible because I stayed healthy, right? I didn't get overwhelmed. I didn't get burned out. I didn't get angry. And at a certain point, you decide, okay, why are you having shows? And then who are you having? And just without getting too, in 2 months, we switched from Hour and Power to LinkedIn strategy, live streaming. So Jason, thanks for being here. What can you add to what Dave and myself have already added?
A lot of good stuff. Thank you for having me here again. And also, it's always great to be here with you and Dave as well, and in the community. That's what's great, and I'll start off with, that's a lot of good information both of you have there to go with. The cliches are cliches for a reason. They say that, the saying is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that's something that's so important to speak to both of your points about what we're doing here and what you're doing, Donna, what you're doing, Dave, about these groups and these communities, is you're able to express that and people can see who you are and what you're about and what you do before you send out those cold, if you were to send out a cold 10,000, newsletters, they know who you are, Don. They know who you are, Dave. They have that awareness, and then it's going to stick. How much stuff do we get in our inbox every day from people we don't know? What happens to that? Well, we used to call the round file, right, back in the day, which doesn't really exist that much anymore because it's all computerized. But this is the opportunity to get in front of people and really build relationships. And there's opportunities as well for people to have that first exposure at a newsletter or something like that. Like you said, Don, putting the, and I'll paraphrase, of course, putting the energy where it belongs and where it's going to get you the most results, and finding out what that is for you and for your community. So that's very important. I have some epiphanies later this week that I'll add that'll touch on this topic if it comes up. But that's kind of what I want to say now. It's very important to kind of know who you are and what you're presenting and what's your purpose, and then finding out how to present that and connect with people based on that.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I was just listening to the 7 Habits of Effective People,
Highly effective.
today, by Stephen Covey. And, he had a philosophy about everything has to go from inside out, not from the outside in.
Right.
Right. So it's you that has to work on you before you can go out there and start working on other people or even being good enough for other people. So there is a point where you become an expert at something based on how everybody else is. Right. So if you can do something at a level that nobody else is, you'd be considered whatever you want to call it, expert, master, whatever. But where you get real validation is when you can look at what someone's doing and instantly know, boom, boom, bang, this needs to be here, that needs to be here, that's missing this. And that way they don't have to get all of the minutia. They don't have to figure out every step. It's like, okay, wow, that looks better, that feels better with a couple questions. So how do you leapfrog? How do you climb the ladder faster? By just having somebody support you in areas that you don't have the ability to or the knowledge of even you need it. And I think that's where collaboration comes in and groups come in, because the idea is everybody's got a plan to get somewhere somehow in some period of time. What can you do to compress the time frame, accelerate the learning curve, but more importantly, get people into action? Because only through their action will they get true learning, because they'll have real experience and they'll be the experience of the experience. They won't be telling people or sharing things with people. They'll actually be there. As an example, I'm always doing polls. I just did a poll last week. I got 96 responses. And the poll was, how often are you on LinkedIn? Daily, weekly, or monthly? Out of 96 people, I identified 40 people I'm going to get in touch with, which is just thank you for visiting and doing the poll. Appreciate your response. By the way, or I see we're aligned. Would you like to have a Zoom? Now, those are fresh people who did something to connect and interact with you. The poll itself wasn't going to change anybody's. If you did it monthly and I did it weekly, but it was funny, 92% of people responded were daily people, which also qualifies them as active and busy on LinkedIn. What you don't want to have is somebody with a ton of letters after their name who came here 6 months ago and posted something, because you're falling in love with the past instead of having something towards the future. But let's get to our audience. Carrie's here. That camel is great at hiding. He's a real chameleon. Didn't pronounce it as well. Thanks for the joke. Hello, Don and everyone. Great to have you here, Carrie. Carl, who we were just talking about his amazing accomplishment with his newsletter, his show that he's doing on his own, his show that he's doing here. I think Carl's a prime example of jumping into the water and learning to swim instead of thinking about how do you swim or worried about swimming. Who you are and what value do you offer is a key in matching small business with funding. And I was even thinking today, because I've got these couple programs that I'm promoting to get your own live stream in a short period of time and have all the best practices, is anytime you're thinking about pricing, it's always going to come down to two things: demand and value. And proven value changes something from a risk to an investment, right? If someone says, I'll get you twice your money and I'll give it back to you next week, you'd say, how much can I give you? If you really believed it was going to happen. And I think that's the key, is where do you place your bets? And your bets are your time, your thought, and your energy. Right. And if you were to break down everything you do with everybody you do it with and measure it, spend 7 minutes with this person, 20 minutes here, an hour there. And if you looked at every activity as an investment, instead of grouping it all together and making it one big soup, next week you might say, well, I'm not talking to 3 of these people or 3 people like this, or at least if I do, I'm going to talk about something else. because I always take full responsibility and accountability. If it's not working, it's one of three things. I'm not doing enough of it. I'm not doing it good enough. Or what I'm saying, no one really wants to hear at this point. So if you can correct those three things, you're going to have a competitive advantage over those who can't. So Dave, getting hot and heavy here. What do you think?
I think it's all great stuff. I am thinking about Carl's point, with what value do you bring? And it really comes down to your point earlier about showing, and I'm trying to make a connection there, showing the results. I don't want someone in my life who keeps going back to, well, I did this 10 years ago. That tells me that they haven't adapted to the new problem set. They haven't changed their mindset to where are the conditions today compared to the past. And as we go along with, day to day, things change. Nothing is constant except change. The old adage. So when we look at a problem set, we value our past experiences, but and at the same time need to look at what is the environment we're in and how can we change our approach or adapt it to an individual's needs or a company's needs to bring them value so that we earn the money or provide a service for whatever reason, whether it's money or personal, interest, feel good, however it turns out. And that's really what it comes down to, is having those personal relationships and adapting our approaches to people. If we can take the money's nice and the relationships are better, in my opinion.
Oh, sure, because it's what you do with what you have, and you always don't know where the other part of the completion comes. And the reason I say that, everything is evolving and progressing, hopefully. And it takes a while to build quality connections, and from there build quality relationships from those connections. But what a show does for you is initially you have a lot of ones. I got a person in finance, I got a person in legal, I got a person blah, blah, blah. Over time, you find a match to that person, right? And then you create pairings and you become more of a master connector. So people like Ford and Todd would be a great show together. So it's kind of like being a booking agent, it's like, who's the audience, who's available, and who would put on the best show, and who would also be on the stage with someone else. And that's, again, where you get a competitive advantage. You just got to be better at everything. You don't got to be the best at everything. And not many people are thinking about that, because in some ways success spoils them because they got there sooner and with less work, and now they're riding it. Where in the beginning, disappointment, frustration, rejection is hard, but it's so valuable, right? Because it measures your measurement. If you think, hey, this is worth $10, and you offer, and someone says, I wouldn't give you more than $1 for it, and 4 people say that, pretty soon you're thinking it's worth $1, right? And if you said $10, well, geez, everywhere else it's 50. Pretty soon you're starting to think maybe it's a little bit too low. And until you get rejection, and the beauty of rejection, if you can find beauty in rejection, is you get the reason. To give you an example, when I started my first business a long time ago, I didn't know anything. I didn't have anything. I just had a paid up Buick. And all I wanted to do was borrow money on the car to start the business. And the first 4 banks turned me down. And I couldn't understand, because the car's worth the loan. I mean, maybe there's some collection fees, but it's not a big risk. But what I did, every time they turned me down, I said, "What? I know I'm accepting your decision. I'm not here to get back. But what is it that I was missing? Or what did I put in there I shouldn't have?" And they would say, well, you're a little light here. You should have been heavier here. So by the 5th presentation, I got my loan, because I got enough answers. And too many people accept rejection. Okay, thanks, goodbye.
Yeah.
Instead of, there's a game after the game. I mean, every movie, there's commentary, there's critics, there's people go over stuff. And I think you got to be open to getting the most out of everything you do, even if it's not the expected result. So, Jason, Dave,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, to your point of finding the balance. And I'm sorry, Jason. I just want to throw this in real quick. Was when I first started my own business, I was offering a price point of X, and I talked to a couple of buddies, former fellow retirees from the military at least, and they said, "Dang, Dave, you are undervaluing yourself. No wonder nobody's coming to you. They think you're cheap and not worth it."
Right.
Okay, well, I bumped up my price to just a little less than what they recommended, and all of a sudden I got a couple of clients. Because the value that you feel yourself that you're worth, also is important. And I just want to throw that out there. It's very important to find what the markers are, not just what you think.
I think that's an extremely valuable point. And the reason for that is value should never be compromised, right? But price can catch up to value. And if you believe it's so true, then you need people to have a test drive.
Yeah.
And that's why everything I do is month to month, or when I do something, hey, let's do it for 60 or 90 days. Let's review it, and everybody's got the same mobility and freedom of choice. And it also puts the responsibility on somebody who says, okay, show me.
Yeah.
Right? You told me, I'm in, now make it happen. And here's the key is always go for low-hanging fruit because speed helps. When you can get someone happy, more confident early and get some early wins, take some of the load off. And the second thing is, if it works and it keeps working, people in their own self-interest will want to continue to expand it because now they know what they have to lose, not what they could possibly win at. Carl comes back with relationships are needed to raise funding, but money does not guarantee creating relationships. And there's always nothing, you're never as bad as the first time you do anything, in my opinion, right? So even when you start a relationship, you're going to have bumps and things that you're going to have to deal with, but it's how you deal with it. How grateful are you, how sincere are you, the people around you, and how easily do we admit mistakes that everybody knows is there. So, Jason, back to you.
A lot of good stuff going on, and I kind of want to, we're under the premise today of talking a little bit about transitioning and adaptability, and I think we've actually touched on it without touching on it. That's life is about transitions, and adaptability is key. And something that's been coming up in the conversation that kind of leads to my point is that nothing happens within a vacuum. Dave, you said you had some folks reach out to you and say, hey, you're underselling. If you didn't have that voice to talk to you, you would have kept doing what you thought you should be doing and not really sure about, well, why are my results not there? But you're not in a vacuum, right? Someone said, hey, try this. And that's kind of the value of this. I want to go a little deep. My world is mental health. And I want to go a little deep because I just had a little epiphany myself the other day that does feed into this. I spent, before we moved, I moved in 2020. My wife and I sold our house, bought a house and all that stuff. And now I'm kind of going forward with my business. But the 12 years before that, I was living in Redwood City in the Bay Area. And I just went back to visit and kind of checking the old haunting grounds and, looking around. And it hit me that those 12 years, I was waiting, not growing. And it hit me really hard because I was like, man, you wasted a lot of time. And I don't know what I was waiting for maybe the right thing to strike me, or waiting for the right idea to come, or, I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I've my whole life I've had my calling, but it never made it my purpose. And I think the key was that people do that too often. They wait and they don't take action to grow. And that's why something like this group is so important, because you don't know what you don't know. And when you can reach more people and grow that community, and and you have that relationship where they're willing to say, hey, Jason, you're just waiting, my friend, you need to take action. That's the kick in the butt sometimes you need. And you could be as resilient and as adaptable as you want, but if you don't know where you're going, it's not going to take you anywhere. So that's the key in something like this. And you don't know, it's everything is, you said, John, we talked about living from within out. Everything external is going to spark something inside of you. So whether it's a newsletter, you don't know how that's going to affect somebody, hopefully in a positive, but it could be their change in their life. Same thing with these LinkedIn lives, these conversations that you have, 5 days a week on the mornings on LinkedIn. Someone might tune in and might change their direction, their life, and they could take charge because maybe they are in somewhat of a vacuum, but this is the key for them. And my life's about being of service, and I think most of us are as well. And that's a huge gift. So we're building our businesses, but it's also within a community and of being of service too, to help others grow and develop.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because to your point, I, along with a lot of people, especially like Kelly, have gotten messages from people saying that I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that show or you. I mean, and that's really, wow. You're talking about making an income or maybe learning something, but saving a life. And not just saving a life, maybe redirecting a life, right? To take somebody and says, hey, I get it now. I need to get more with responsibility and accountability, because, the weird thing is so many people are just happy to leg it out.
Right.
I can make it with the money I have and whatever I have if I just live like this. But what are they legging out? This is their life.
Right.
What are they going to get when they get to the end? And whatever is there is still going to be there. Where's the fire?
Yeah, we only regret the decisions we don't make, the actions we don't take, the things we didn't do. So why not have the chance to experience something outside our normal activities?
Well, and I think you're so right, Dave, because the big question is why? Everybody knows what they're doing.
Yep.
Right? If you got a serious problem, you probably know it more than anybody else has yet. And if you know it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I think, Don, you're getting to, we've talked in the past and the shows I've done with you about, my mental health side and the speaking I've done, the last point of my M's is meaning. What's your why? What's your purpose? What drives you to want to do something outside of what you would normally do? How are you going to adapt to a situation that makes you feel uncomfortable, and does it align with why you want to do things in your life? I mean, you've got to have a reason. If you don't have that, then everything else, as you pointed out, is you start picking and pecking, and you just start doing random things that aren't taking you on a path towards fulfillment or reward or service to others. And, that in itself, in turns to your, takes you inward. Why do you do things? What's your purpose? Has to be answered first, in my opinion, so that all these other things come into play.
And by being in charge of your plan.
Yes.
And the ability to control your plan, because, it's a discipline. But whenever I put my mind to doing something, I don't quit unless I learn something I didn't know and it says, hey, that's a dead end, or you're not, it's just not going to happen. But it's a little steps. I just lost 14 pounds in the last 6 weeks. Why? Because I determined I would lose 15 pounds actually in 6 weeks. At one time, I lost 42 pounds in 21 weeks by just scheduling everything I ate. I knew I had choices. I could change eggs for this, but I never strayed. It was like Weight Watchers. I haven't put a pound on since then. And at a certain point, hey, 2 pounds a week, keep doing this, count 21 weeks, you're home. And my wife did it in 22 weeks. We both lost that. My daughter lost 20, because you do things as a family. And it's hard to lose weight if someone's eating a pepperoni pizza, telling, oh man, how can you eat those green beans over there? Versus, hey, do you need an extra portion of that?
I have to laugh, Don, because when I was a teenager, my parents both went on Weight Watchers, and we're talking back in the mid 80s, and they both gained 5 pounds. I lost 10 because they were cheating and not feeding.
But you know what I loved about Weight Watchers back then? is the meetings.
Yeah.
It was the people. When you showed up, you had a weigh in. When you knew you're weighing in 3 days, you check your weight and say, I'm 3 pounds over. Well, for the next 3 days, you're going to eat a lot of celery, right? But you won't drink any water that day. And it was a commitment. And I never went a week without losing. But what I learned is, and they have a saying, when you're down, you need the meetings. When you're up, the meetings need you. And I stayed with the program 4 years after I hit my goal. And they give you a free ride if you stay within a couple pounds. So it didn't cost nothing because these people helped me. Now is my turn to help them. And there's a joy to giving if there's something more to it than the hope of getting. Because nature will take its course if you let it. So many people are disappointed with the progress. They're not good enough yet. That's their issue. It's not the universe isn't ready for them. It's because you need some, want some. That has nothing to do with it. It's what do you deserve? And then when you get it, what are you willing to do to work to keep it and to build on it? Because so many people get fresh starts that last so little, and then they go back to their uncomfortable, comfortable life. And what I learned is when it's not about you, it becomes more important.
Yeah.
So when you got people who care about you, you got an obligation to them to care about yourself, even if you don't care about yourself. And I think that's where selfish and unselfish start to show up. And the other thing is, whatever you're doing, it's the same time of day that you have. So anytime you catch yourself doing something that really is kind of dumb, it takes you further from your goal, right? If you're on a straight route to Chicago, you don't start going east for 30 miles and wrap around and come back or something. And I don't know, maybe it takes somebody with a little bit more OCD, to set something and forget it and just put your head down and move forward. And I think that's where you got to have a little bit of tunnel vision. You got to have some blinkers on or blinders where you're just looking straight ahead and you're not getting caught up in the other stuff. And you become the example for other people. And with shows like this will be seen for who knows how long into the future and what technology will be years from now. But again, if 3 or 4 people write you a letter saying you saved my life, maybe there's 30, 40 more of yet to hear what we have to say. And all you got to do is take a little bit. It's not like taking the whole bucket. It's like, hey, I like that idea. I'm going to incorporate that. And I think after 700 shows, I become a little Jason, a little bit of Dave, a little bit of Kelly, because you pick up some good ideas. You pick up ways to respond to things. And then all of a sudden, you can't help but not be something better than yourself because you brought all these wonderful people in a natural state together. So, we talked about relationships with Carl, and today is the first day of your life, right? Every day is a fresh start. And I think, the other big thing is you got to forgive yourself. And the past is the past. It's never going to change. Whatever price you paid or didn't pay, that game's been played. What do you want to do to make up for it? Or what do you want to do to use that as a lesson and get some more value out of it based on what you do next? So, Jason, thoughts?
Something that I talk about a lot that what you were just talking about is, the past is prologue, as they say, and it's behind us, but there's lessons there. And the beauty of a community like this is that you have a lot of different lessons. So you're not going to your library of one book. There's a whole section of people that have gone through something similar, and you can learn from their lessons. That's the beauty of it. I'd rather learn, Don, I'd rather learn from your mistakes than learn from my mistakes. And that's the beauty of community, is that we can all show up here and, I'm 52. I've gone through I have a lot of lessons, and I've got more lessons ahead of me too, which is great because that means I'm learning and I'm growing. But I've got something to say. I can share some of stuff that I've gone through. Same way with everyone on here. Same way with everyone that's watching in the community. I'd love to hear, some of their insights as well, because that not only helps direct the conversation, but actually can help us as we flip the switch off, right? As we hit the top of the hour, we're going to go on with the rest of our day. But if we could take something with us, that's beautiful. And that's the key, is that to be able to be open to that and to have a community where you can have that you can share with and be shared with at the same time.
Well, there's also depth to everything that most people don't see on the superficial surface.
Right.
Because if you look at it, these shows allow everybody to get to know all of us in an hour conversation that's as sincere and honest and hopeful as we can make it. And when they look at your profile now, they see a different picture than they had before that. They understand your words, they understand your whys. And you got to give people that information for them to make quality decisions. And, unless you're perfect, right? You don't want your picture and your profile to be the only thing that gets between you and the person. You want them to get to know you as an individual, get to know how you deal with things. And, if you can somehow look at having all the money you ever need, what would you do then with your time? Right? So if you never had to charge a nickel, what would you offer that would be of value to others and also be something you would enjoy? Well, that's where you have to start, or you should start.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with making money. I think you can make more money than you'll ever know if you set it up the right way, because at that point where the real value in money is in scale. It's not making more money off of a person. It's bringing more value to a larger group that, with time and cost efficiency, hey, if it was one-on-one, it could be $400 or $500 an hour. If it's 50 people in a room for an hour, it's $5 each. Right? Same information, but now not only that, people would say, well, it's a little diluted. I'm sharing with these other people. Yeah, you're sharing knowledge. You're hearing their experiences. And how many $5 bills do you have before you add up to 500? So 1 hour for somebody for 500 could be 100 groups at $5 each or whatever it is. And, you let the people then decide, well, do I want to put 10 more bucks into this or 10 more bucks into that or an hour into here? You got to give them a reason to come back based on what you just gave them, right? Restaurants are only as good as the last meal you ate there. And if it was good, you'll probably come back. If not, could have been a bad night, bad chef, but you're never going to ask that because there's too many places. So Dave, pretty all around the place today.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin.
Well, you spin everybody's mind, and they got my mind.
I just think the more I've learned, with these engagements with you and Jason, with the collaboration group, I have seen my own thought process, as Don, going from the mental health, and I was trying to do two things at once, and then Carl, to his credit, looked at me and said, you got to get off the pot of one of them. You got to stick with one or the other, focus on it, and then build the other one up later. Focus on one. Your mind can only go so many places at a time and be effective as you're doing it. So I've had to adapt my process, while I still have a very strong interest in the mental health side. I know that my business focus on the security side will bring me some, excitement, some happiness, some value to somebody, but I don't have to be 100% focused on mental health. I can do this. I can talk to other people on the side and still be effective in what I want to accomplish in my life, in my business, in my family relationships in particular. So it's really been an adventure that I've had to learn, just in the last 6 months. How do I adapt and change my focus to be effective in what I want to accomplish in this world? It's been fun, and it's been very rewarding in the last 6 months.
Well, it's been great getting to know you over the 6 months because one can see how one evolves by seeing someone every week or two.
Yeah.
And when you're yourself, you see yourself as every minute or two or
Yeah.
every day or two, and you don't see how you're growing or changing. Plus, what you're learning, and everybody should be learning, is better skill sets. So whether
Well, I
you
think
aim lives, no, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, and I think we've talked about that here is, I was very uncomfortable. I wanted to do public speaking. I said, well, I'm not very experienced in that. Well, Don, you put out, do you want to join the show? Okay, I'd love to. And, I think I pointed out the first couple of times I did it, the back of my shirt was just covered in sweat. I was very nervous. I was, getting back into the speaking roles and, okay, taking that experience going, okay, well, what did I do well? What did I do poorly? Okay, how am I going to adapt for the next time? And then doing these lesson learned process in my head really helped me adapt to how do I improve. And it's a cycle of improvement. Nothing's gonna, like you said, you're only bad the first time you try something. But if you always look back and go, okay, what did I do well? What can I improve on? Don't look at the negative of, oh, you really screwed that up. No, what can I work on? You will blossom into something that's better than it was the day before.
Well, you know what it really signifies is whoever you were that worried those first two times, you're not that anymore.
Right.
Right. So whatever the foundation was or the reason for it was based on a belief system or something, and all of a sudden reality shows up. And you say, well, I was worried about nothing. How many times do you ever say to yourself, I was all caught up in this to be a nothing burger? And I think that's fun. And I think fun is the thing. How many people go golfing for the first time and they're just having a ball out in the open, walking around, hitting a ball? And there's other people do it for the first time and they throw their clubs in the water. They go absolutely nuts. And if you look at everything as a new experience, I'm lucky to have a chance to be in this museum or be in this park for the first time. And I think catching yourself in the moment keeps you in the moment.
And not comparing yourself to others who've been doing it for a long time and have had those experiences and lessons learned along the way and processed what they've learned. You can't compare yourself to their experience because it's not the same.
Well, actually, I mean, not to diminish old timers who did great and learned great. It's a new world.
Yeah.
It's a new stage. Whatever they did it from the old stage, from old protocol, and there's nothing wrong. And I'm sure they can reinvent themselves and pivot as fast as anybody else. But it's the people for the first time who don't have all this credit, who don't have all these accolades and all that comes with success, that have to now earn it. They say first generation builds everything, second generation expands everything, and the third generation loses it or doesn't participate.
Yeah.
Right? So you'd rather be the first in, and plus you'd rather be an original. The hard thing about born into a rich family is everybody thinks less of you because they think you got a great head start and you got people behind you and money, where the person who has to struggle just to eat every day, bless you. I think that's the key, is enjoying the stretch, right? Seeing how far you can go and stretch it a little bit. That's how you get stronger. If you started out at 30 pounds weights and that's all you did, versus add another 5, 10 every so often. And, at the end of the day, no one gets out of here alive anyways. You can't take nothing with you, and no one's guaranteed tomorrow. So, I mean, that's just the way it is. It's not a philosophy. So, and it's not like, hey, I'm running out of time, I got to do something great, but I should do something that's nourishing.
Yeah.
Right? I should do something that makes me really, like, if I want to lose weight. I know, they said, I heard this saying that no dessert is worth the idea of feeling so much better. You know, so if you look at, hey, if I lost 10 pounds, my clothes would fit, I would feel better, it'd be less to deal with, then you do it. But here's the thing, you got to see that first pound or two fall off.
Yeah.
Because if you're working hard and you're eating lettuce and carrots and everybody else is having a ball and nothing happens, you wonder, well, nothing could happen having a ball. So Jason, your turn.
You know, thank you. You know, something that's come up, I think all of us have mentioned today, is about having your why and having your purpose. And you're just talking about that, you know, so why not have that dessert? Because that dessert is so much easier. Oh my goodness, right in that moment, right in front of you, that wonderful dessert is so much easier than working out and stuff like that in front of you down the road. But when you have a big enough why, when you have your purpose, you can see that. So as you transition into things, why are you transitioning? Where are you going? Where do you want to go? And have a vision of that. And the bigger and the brighter that vision is, the more compelling it is, and it can pull you through passing on that dessert. Same thing with our businesses. You know, LinkedIn, we mostly deal with business and, you know, personal stuff. And what's that compelling picture of your future that's going to pull you through? And I think something like, when you transition, have an idea of where you're going. And groups like this help that, because maybe you don't see where you're going. Maybe you don't have a great vision. You know what you want, what you have or you don't want. You might have a, you know, when I talk to clients, the first meeting, they can list pages of what they don't want. But when I say, okay, and I let them get it all out, that's great information and it helps me to help them. And then I say, okay, well, what do you want? Well, I don't want this. No, okay, we've gone over what we don't want. What do you want? And it's hard. It's hard for us because we're natural, right? We have that thing in our heads where it's the negativity bias. We tend to look at what we want to get away from instead of where we're going. Groups like this, communities can help you to be like, I hadn't thought of that before. You know, what does Dave do for a living? Oh, that's interesting. I have interest in that. You know, I haven't seen that as an example. Of course, we're not up here to be anyone's example per se, but just having those conversations with more people in front of more groups and building that where you can see things that you hadn't seen before, because you know your next move might be something that you never contemplated. I heard a saying the other day from Neville Goddard. I just went through all of his books and my head's kind of blown, but he says that, you know, fantasy collects and imagination directs. So, you know, your imagination only goes as far as what you know. You can imagine things that you know, but you can't imagine things you don't know. So that's what fantasy is. Fantasy is like anything goes. And to kind of take it to a far thing, but in talking from where my world is, you know, these ideas that are being expressed here might be that idea that someone never thought of before. And then they can imagine and go forward with that. And so that's key to stuff like this to help you get to where you want to go.
Well, that's great, because I think what it lends itself to is having a more comprehensive idea and integrated process. And what I'll like to say, especially when it comes to adaptability, is there shouldn't be any absolutes. Right. So in other words, if I'm at a big family occasion and they're serving things I haven't eaten in years, I'm going to take the night off and do it. Right.
Yep.
Because it's only, you know, an occasion like this only happens, you know, and you want to. But if you know you get back on your horse tomorrow, and, you know, even in Weight Watchers, I'm not here to promote them, is they always tell you, if you have an urge, satisfy it. Right. If you just got to have a piece of chocolate, then have the piece, not the bar. Right. And then you're done with it, because the more you deprive yourself of something, the more you're going to want it. And one day you're going to lose your mind and eat 12 bars of it, because once you've gone too far, you can always go further. So I think everything is relative. Everything's conditional. Sometimes it is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But as long as over a week, over a few days, you're still on track. The other thing is you start to visualize things and justify what you're doing. So again, using weight loss as an example, I thought, well, the less you eat, the less you buy. So now you're saving some money. The less you buy, the less you have to store, right? Now you got more space. And the less you eat, the more time you have. So you get all these things for not doing something. You know, how many times do you say, well, don't jump over the bridge? Like I wasn't going to do it to anyways. So, you know, and the last thing I remember is there's only like the distance between your mouth and your throat that you know what you're eating. Once you swallow it, it could have been anything. For that 6-7 inch runway, you're now putting your whole body at risk because you love the taste, you know, and that's really what it is. If the best thing in the world tasted awful, you would quit it in a minute. You know, maybe throw pepper on everything that was good. Maybe that'll teach you not to eat it. But you got to play games with yourself. You know, you got to find new doorways to get into yourself. And there's got to be a time where it says, hey, enough's enough. You know, when something close happened or something really bad happened, you say, that's it. I mean, it took that to shake me up, to get me going. And there's also a point where you say, I'm just too old for this. You know, I mean, I could do this. I remember when I was younger, I could stay up all night and still be fresh in the morning. And, and at a certain point, I'm too old for that. And I'm too tired for that. And I'm glad because now it's time for something new, something different, something exciting. And the less time you have, the more risk you're willing to take, right? Because if you got this far, you think you can leg it out. So, you know, I think it's all about having that time to reflect, having that time to review, you know, being a third party to your own life, right? And hey, let's see what we got. Let's see where we started. And I think that's so important is go back to where you started. See how you were doing things, who you were connecting with, you know, and this has only really taken hold probably the last 14 months. You know, there's hardly anybody who started on the show in the beginning that's on the show besides Kelly. And why is that? First of all, the show changed. And after a while, people stopped growing and other people kept. Right? So everybody was good enough when they were starting out, but some people took the bull by the horns and really took advantage. And other people say, I'm just comfortable. And at a certain point, disengaging is just as important as engaging. And sometimes, unless you disengage, you can't engage. And why carry anybody? Right? And that's why I've always come up with that 2-step rule. You take a step, I take a step, I take a step, you take a step, but nobody should take 2 steps. And once you know that your next step is dependent on your last step and how you show up, right? And if people aren't showing up, that's something. And it's okay. You see, if you can say, I'm not judging, everything is okay for whoever's doing whatever they're doing because they got a different path, possibly. They got a different timetable. Or maybe they just don't care and whatever it is good enough. You don't want to change people. You want to find people who can help change you. And I think that's so important. So, Dave?
Wow. Sorry, my allergies are getting me here real quick. I don't know why, but you know, something you said just triggered is, you know, as an omen kind of a thing, as another tick in the block for me was, you know, I was talking to an old shipmate yesterday and said, you know, I'm kind of close to ending it with this client. And he said, if you're 80% there, why are you waiting? Just do it. And what you just said just made me go, gosh, maybe it is time. You know, he's not in alignment with where I want to go as a business anymore. He's still a friend, but he's not a business relationship I want to keep going with. So I might need to change that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, kind of wrapping everything up, you know, I just don't, I know we're getting to the end. I don't want to miss this, but I heard a quote, I think it was yesterday, and I have it written down here. The more you live in someone's shadow, the longer it takes to cast your own. And that kind of hit personally because I refused for a very long time to adapt to my own and have my own why, have my own purpose, because I was living in someone else's shadow. And that comparison model I was talking about earlier made me think of this quote. Take the risk, see what the environment is, see where you can have a value added, and change your path if it's the right time for you. Don't wait for a better time because it's never going to happen. The best time to take action is now. And it may not be perfect, and you're going to have to change your plans a little bit, adapt, maybe take a detour for a couple of weeks or months or days, and come back to the path, but you're always moving forward towards your goal. And that's the real ending, is what is your point? What's your why that you want to end up at? And in my opinion, before you get there, you should have a next one lined up, so you're not stagnating for any period of time. And that really just hit me hard yesterday when I heard that quote. And in the last year, I've kind of taken it to heart and realized, okay, I was living in someone's shadow. It's time to be my own person and cast my own shadow. So just that quote yesterday when I heard it was like, okay, there's the light bulb. I did something right here.
Well, you hit on so many good points, because even reading or listening to these audio books, I listen to one every day, and I can knock out a book probably in a week, to a week and a half. And you're just walking, listening, and some things just fall into place. And then someone says something that triggers something. Hey, that's something, another way of looking at something I wasn't looking at. The other element is, wouldn't you rather be ahead of time than behind time? Wouldn't you be the one being proactive and making changes than allowing things just to happen so you don't have to do them? And that's where responsibility and accountability come in, because if you didn't have a choice, if someone said, go there and do this and get it done, it wouldn't matter how you felt. If you were committed, just do it.
Yeah.
Right? And when you have the choice, you tend not to take it. And you find some redeeming value that says, give it another week. I mean, I remember with so many employees that I had to work with, that every time I decided to terminate our relationship with an employee, I wish I would have done it earlier. There wasn't nothing waiting that wasn't there already. If anything, they knew better than you that they weren't performing, they weren't showing up, and the people around them knew it. And that's where you got a responsibility. If you got a bad fit in the office, you're not you and that person. You're you and that person in the group they're in. And the group they're in thinks, hey, when is Don going to work this out?
Yeah.
Or, hey, maybe this is acceptable. Maybe this is the new standard. So if he or she could do it, why shouldn't I do it? And, how important is something to you? How much would you protect your family and your home from an outsider or even an insider? You would draw the line. You say, hey, that's not acceptable, or we're not going to accept that here. And I think that changes it. So how much do you stand up for yourself? How much do you stand up for what you believe in and who you believe in? And I think that's not a choice, it's a responsibility. And when you shy away from your responsibilities, you're not that responsible. And now you got yourself to blame again. Yeah, I knew what I should have done. I was able to do it. But, and you could say that about anything. I'm going shopping today. No, I'm not. I'm going to exercise today. No, I'm not. And you're having this internal craziness going on. And, I learned a long time ago, I've been married 47 years now to the most wonderful woman in the world, is by the time you share what it is you don't like, you could have fixed it and never talked about it. How many times did someone say, hey, how come you didn't turn off this light? And they're right next to the light. Right? Then turn it off. I'm not saying everybody should pick up everybody's stuff, but you're going to spend 5 minutes talking about something you could have fixed yourself in 20 seconds. And I think that's when keeping score isn't necessary. Too many people are are majoring in the minors. Oh, they didn't do this. Oh, they didn't do this. And now they're this. Well, you're playing a small game with a small mind and don't expect to get a big benefit out of it. And that's the thing. If you're honest with yourself, say, yeah, I didn't show up. I didn't do anything. Why am I surprised when I didn't get anything? Yeah. And I think that's important. I just like winning. I come to play and I play to win, and eventually you win because other people don't play to win. Believe me, there's so many people with so much talent, so much ability, so much wherewithal, but they don't have their head straight. They don't have a plan in place. They're just doing, and maybe they'll catch a lucky break here and there, but that's not sustainable. So your last thoughts, Jason? I think this has been a very, very stimulating, thought-provoking conversation for all of us. And I think if you win with the three of us, that's a huge win, and whatever collaterally gets benefited is even better.
Definitely. I just want to leave with this saying, we're talking about transitions and things of that nature. And remember, everything that brought you to this point, all of your knowledge, all your experience, whatever, that's the beginning. It's the floor, not the ceiling. And so many times in our mindset, we see the ceiling and there is no ceiling. So that's the floor, not the ceiling. Grow from there, go from there.
I think that's beautiful. And, you don't know what you don't know. The other thing, last thing I'll throw in, is wherever you're going may lead you to somewhere you would have never got without starting where you started.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You could decide I'm going to Chicago and say, hey, no, I got something cool in New York, but I'm already on the road, and all I got to do is make a shift here. And so many things you don't want to accomplish when it leads you to something or even somebody.
Yeah.
One person could change your whole life tomorrow. And it's happened to me a few times where someone just took me under their wing for, I don't know why. I didn't know what I had that made them want to do it. But it also gave me opportunities I would have never had if I wasn't open to building relationships, open to trusting. And I think trust is the foundation to every relationship. And when you don't have it, you have nothing. Because every communication, every conversation is suspect. And the commitment isn't there. Oh yeah, we agreed, but the next day it didn't mean anything. So why are we going to talk about it again? And I think it's little by little, how do you eat an elephant? One piece at a time. So anyways, 1 minute over. Want to thank everybody for being here. Come back tomorrow. It'll be Kelly and me for the 118th or 19th time. And Kelly's doing amazing things on the Awesome Journey with Christy Howard. It's so fun not only see how far you've come with someone else, but how far they've come with all these other people, and it spreads. So again, thank you very much. See you in 23 hours.